Cool toys are worth it.
Hey, dude, you only live once, right?
Hello.
How's it going, brother?
Where's Brad Chad?
You know, I put a message out to a bunch of people and nobody, summer deal going right now.
Good.
Doggy bone.
Tomorrow, on your boat, Doug, you're gonna have some beers.
Yeah.
Not as good as mine. Hey.
Everybody could have something like that.
They're all beers, huh? They have.
Start here. 2 more minutes. Whatever you want.
Really?
Hey, if any of you guys want to comment on any of the proposals, they're all here. So it'd actually be good to have kind of an overall response from Idaho River Community Alliance Group.
You can sit down and and the water's low.
Yeah, exactly.
No, what happened?
Well, it's up to you guys, so basically,
I can't remember last time.
8 o'clock.
Didn't think you can make it.
How you doing?
Yeah.
How are you?
Good.
Joe, you know Jen, don't you?
Yeah, we see
No, I
you
don't know
all
her
the
at all.
time. Are you gonna be there Saturday?
I see her more than you.
Yeah. Yeah, are you gonna be there Saturday? I don't know.
What's Saturday?
Maybe not to the soccer tournament.
Well, oh, no, his arm's still,
Oh, okay.
he hasn't been given the full release yet.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we're gearing up for that. Yeah, so.
A lot of pizza.
Sorry.
No, I actually rearranged you.
I guess that's not over here.
Oh, you both are gonna be up there, so either way. Tell me, the water.
What are you doing here?
I was just up there. So we were cabin.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, like,
I saw her.
Okay.
Like it's going from, it goes from freaking 15 down to.
Sure.
That's daily.
Yeah, every day.
Everybody's commented on it.
Every day.
So then it's gonna be.
Yeah.
Never had baby oranges on.
Well, you have now.
About to.
You ever been to Micah range? The range of Micah? Going tomorrow. Oh, this is. Yeah. Got everything out there now. I've got. South of, Spokane. It's like the south.
Got your little Christmas board.
Yep.
Can't get enough of each other. Which one is it?
Probably, southeast of Spokane, something up. I think it's Rock Lake.
Long way from Rock Lake. I mean, it's almost diagonal from Rock Lake. What is it? The Micah shooting range? Yeah. It's the Spokane Valley Gym.
Do I not even?
Didn't come up. But maybe I by chance went to Sportsman After Mid-Valley, because that goes to Drake. So, first is them do. And, I went to Portsmouth and I was like, grabbing, they had, 140 bucks in Hall. I got them, well, yes, it's 5 to 140, but the Hall points, did pretty good, I guess. And so, they have 4 boxes of Gabrielle, and this guy walks up and starts talking to me, and we start talking, you know. He's like, yeah, it's right up here. I was like, where's that? He told me, so tomorrow we're supposed to have him deliver.
Exactly.
That?
So that's like a red hat. No, the hat that I have.
Oh, freedom.
I mean, I don't get apple. Adam needs an apple and work on it.
Oh, my God. Yeah, they created you.
Look where I got it.
Couple more minutes. No, it's not yet supposed to be one fight, like, sort of, one fight.
Don't put Mark in the if you want to.
Well, always, like, it was kind of a while ago, I had to,
More people.
A lot of people, I guess, a lot that like the fish, the river from Memorial down. There's some people that all they fish on
what's that?
from Memorial down, August. And sometimes that's the only time they ever split fish. That north there by the railroad bridge, it's like a community of people that look forward to that every year. One or two words to catch. Both proposals both say it in it. And it's such a small amount, like they can't be pulling more than maybe 50, 60 fish out of the entire season. So we always used to have August would open. August would be like, how much fish? Go all the way to September, you can harvest.
Not any problem with it, like 4 years.
Yeah.
How long is it?
This is our current.
I'm situated. Yeah.
We're doing Saturday. Friday. Good. Oh, kids wanna come grab stuff all day? Can't stop there. Do you remember?
You know why? You know why?
Yeah, it's our,
I would rather have it where
plant also.
it's probably over at.
Is that the pool and then
You know,
the?
they don't ever have the mouth. How about that water? That's Memorial. That shouldn't count for that big carp.
He's little.
Fish that go. No, he's currently on board with the ag or in
Oh, really? Okay, so it's his brother and another.
You don't think so?
Two and then Alex.
Maybe.
For the tournament. That's
Oh,
all that's
you
in
want
print.
to
Do
do.
some refereeing.
No, it's so they're
Does she have any, I mean, is she coaching over there right now? She's not at all.
They overclass.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's the, assistant girls coach.
Would she have any girls on the team that want to rest? We need more, I think I only have like 9 reps right now. We tried to reach out to the energetic group of girls, to see if there's anything. She's familiar with the pretty great, so.
In the morning, you guys coach, you can sit in one spot.
They're girls and water players.
They might go down and
Try to get early start.
Can you give them extra credit?
Jim was asking.
You can catch them on a good day. Not a lot of wind, not a lot of heat, or rain, or whatever. That's perfect conditions.
I can think we had a large part in helping getting the seasons open and getting people back fishing. And, basically here tonight, we want to talk about Steelhead Proposal 1 and 2, and, you know, maybe some other, the proposed changes that we have. We're just kind of, want to know more about it. A lot of us, it affects us deeply in the pocketbook, and, we need to know, and Joe's gonna clarify, you know, he's gonna talk about the surveys and the comments that he had that led him up to making the Clearwater working group, and then we got some members that were in the Clearwater working group. We got Travis, we got Jason, I know Crawford was also in there. Is there anybody else who was in that working group? And Tracy, and, so, we just wanna learn more. We have to make a decision and a statement. And we want to make sure that we make the right decision. We want to make an educated statement. We just don't want to you know, make a statement and take a stand or accept either proposal without knowing more about them. So Joe's gonna give us the rundown, and then after that, we'll have some question and answer. Kind of want to stay to those topics. Don't want to really keep it a late meeting, so with that, I'll just turn it over to Joe.
Thanks, Toby, and thanks everybody for having me come speak with you today. That echo's gonna drive me crazy there. So, before I begin, I do want to introduce a few fish and game people here because I think you may want to chat with them afterwards. First, we have Don Ebert on the left in the back there. He's our Fish and Game Commissioner, and for those of you who aren't aware, it's actually the commission who sets our seasons and limits. Fish and Game staff, like myself, we actually provide recommendations, but it's the commission that sets the seasons and limits based on recommendations and other information provided to them. So I think Don would be somebody that many of you might want to talk to. To his right is JJ Tier. He's my boss. He is called the regional supervisor, and he pretty much oversees everything that happens in our region. So fish, wildlife, enforcement, the whole thing. And then we have Don Whitney here. Don Whitney is our anadromous harvest monitoring biologist. And I think a lot of the information that I'm going to present here, it was he and his staff that actually collected it. So I'm going to start into this presentation. Aaron, can you stop my echo over here?
I tried by muting your computer. Lauren, is your computer muted?
I don't have my computer, so not a problem.
All right, so no and yes. Well, let's go from there. I'll see if I can fix it else or some other way.
Are you guys fine with that echo back in this corner? All right, perfect. All right, so I'm here to talk to you about the proposals. These are anadromous fisheries proposals that were forwarded by the Clearwater region staff to receive public comment. And the comments that we receive on these proposals will be used to set seasons and limits for the next 3 years. So the Clearwater region forwarded 4 different proposals. 3 of them were developed by Fish and Game staff, and then 1 of them was developed by the Clearwater River Fisheries Working Group, and that's the one that I think most of you are interested in, and it's the one that I'm going to spend the most time talking about, so you understand why we developed this group, the process the group went through, some of the information that they considered, and why they developed the proposals they did. So before I get into discussing on the proposals, though, I think it's important for everybody to understand how the Fish and Game sets the seasons and limits, so you'll understand how this particular issue fits into that topic. So the Idaho Fish and Game, we kind of go through a 7-step process when setting seasons and limits for most of our fisheries. Not spring Chinook, but almost all the others. So the first step is what we call the data gathering and informal scoping period, and pretty much that's going on all the time. Fish and Game's out there doing research, learning new things, and when we learn new things, we like to share it with the public and understand what their thoughts are about it. At the same time, if we hear a consistent message coming from folks, we also like to then take that to the public in a more formal state and see what their thoughts are. Which takes us to this formal scoping period. Again, when we hear things or learn things, we'll bring it to the formal scoping period and ask public their thoughts on it. So these formal scoping periods can be in a form of public meetings. They can be internet surveys. This year, because of COVID, we did virtual meetings, and it covered a lot, many different issues, and some of them are the proposals that you hear today. And so based on the comments we get in this formal scoping period, the Fish and Game will develop proposals. So this is what we do in most cases, but not necessarily the case, and especially in the issue you're talking about today. And I'm going to come back to that issue a little bit later. And then based on staff recommendations for proposals, we'll actually show them to the commission, and if they give us a head nod, then we'll take them to the public for further input. And so that's where we are now. We have got the nod from the commission to take all these proposals to the public to see what their thoughts are on them. And then based on the public input on these proposals, the Fish and Game staff will develop season and limit recommendations, and then the commission will use these recommendations as well as other information provided to them to set seasons and limits for the next 3 years. So the commission will not need till November to set seasons for the next 3 years on these proposals. So, all right, so that is the process we go through. So let's talk about this particular proposal that I think most of you are interested on. It's the steelhead and fall chinook proposal in the Clearwater River. So specifically, we're talking about steelhead and fall chinook in this circled area. So the Clearwater River, the Middle Fork Clearwater River, the South Fork Clearwater River, and the North Fork. So those are the areas that this proposal covers. And I think everybody's aware why the Clearwater region is famous. It's because of the steelhead run. It's not just because this run is often very large, it's also because the fish are very large. And in fact, in the entire Columbia River Basin, probably overall the largest size steelhead enter the Clearwater Basin. And it brings people from around the nation, and in our creel surveys, we often see people from multiple countries. So I think it's fair to say this is a world-renowned steelhead fishery. On top of that, the Clearwater region also provides probably the only real catch and release steelhead season in the entire state of Idaho. The catch and release season, as you know, goes from July 1 all the way through October 14. And I can tell you, when we creel folks during this survey, we also interview people from around the nation and multiple countries too. So this is also what I would consider to be a world-renowned steelhead fishery. So where some of the controversy comes in, or came in anyway, is because of recovery efforts for fall chinook, their abundances have now reached levels where we can provide harvest on both hatchery and wild fish. And once we started getting to these levels, we had people asking us, why can't we open these fisheries? And so when we started asking people's thoughts on it, we also heard back from others who, like people who enjoy the catch release season, saying, well, we don't want more boating traffic and more effort on this already busy river. So because we were hearing multiple things, we set out to gather more information on this. And so over a 2-year period, we interviewed almost 3,000 people while fishing on the Clearwater River. We wanted to know what the people fishing the Clearwater River thought. And so in these surveys, we asked people, hey, rank from 1 to 5 your support of providing a fall chinook fishery during the catch and release steelhead season, with 1 being more support and 5 being the least support. And this information is summarized here. The yellow indicates responses from non-fly anglers, and the red is from fly anglers. So you can see the most common response for fly anglers was a 5, which means these people were not in support or didn't even really want a fall finish fishery, whereas the most common response for non-fly anglers is a 1, which meant they're really highly in support. And so this division in opinion obviously is what was fueling some of this controversy. So that's not the only controversy that was going on the river. I can tell you that over the last 10 years, we were hearing more and more often that catch rates after the harvest season opened were dropping too quickly. And some people are asking us if we could make the rules more restrictive to help prolong higher catch rates into the fall. And so I can tell you the last scoping period, so 3 years ago when we were looking at the season, we decided, all right, we've heard this enough, let's see what the public thinks about it. And so we asked them, what type of seasons and limits would you like to see on the Clearwater? And we asked them, you want to keep it the same? Would you like a longer catch and release season? Would you like lower limits, or would you like higher limits? And so you can see here's a summary of these responses. Most of the people said keep it the same, 38%. However, if you combine these two, these are more restrictive. 40% of the people wanted something more restrictive, either to lower limits or catch and release. They didn't necessarily agree on how to do it, but it does show you that there was a division in opinion. 40% wanted something more restrictive, 38% wanted something the same, and 15% wanted more harvest opportunity. And so after these multiple sources of potential conflict, it became very evident to Idaho Fish and Game that if we started developing any proposals for these fisheries, there's going to be a lot of pushback. And so we decided, let's try a different approach. And so once again, here's that diagram showing the 7 steps that we go through to set the limits. So in this particular case, we decided that instead of Idaho Fish and Game developing the proposals, why don't we have the people and anglers that will be influenced most by these potential seasons and limits be the ones who are involved in developing the proposals and help guiding future seasons and limits for these fisheries. And so when we talked about this 3 years ago, the public supported this. I can tell you our commissioner at the time supported this. And it was also adopted in our fisheries management plan, which all the commissioners voted for. So this new approach was widely supported, although I can tell you this is the first time I've ever been involved in it. First time that I've ever seen it involved in fisheries since I've been involved, so at least 15 years. So quite a new approach, but we wanted to see run it through, and we thought this was a great strategy. All right, so just so you know, that circle there, that's where we are now. We're in step 5 once again. So those proposals that the working group developed have got the nod from the commission, and now we've taken them to the public. I think all of you have read them, and that's why we are here. All right, so here are the members of the group. I think Toby did introduce 3 of them, 13 members all together. And here's how they represent the different groups they represent. There were 2 people that represented guides with a gear emphasis, 1 person that represented guides with a fly emphasis, 2 steelhead fly anglers, 4 different gear type anglers that represented steelhead and false chinook anglers. There was 1 combo angler, 2 businesses, and 1 NGO, that's Eric, who represents Trout Unlimited. So a lot of people have asked me, how did we go about selecting this group of people? So we did it in multiple ways. The first thing we did was we accepted all nominations. So sent out an email saying if anybody's interested, let me know. We had one of our public meetings, we had a handout and it said sign up on the bottom if you're interested. We also went to some of the more influential groups, like your group here, and asked the group, hey, who would you like to represent you? And you provided me multiple nominations. We also went to the Spay Claves, did the same with them. Went to the Lewis Clark Chamber of Commerce, Orfino Chamber of Commerce, and they gave us people as well, and then Fish and Game actually nominated, some as well. And so what we did then is, I think I had a pool of at least 40 nominations, and we went through, or I went through and interviewed everybody that said they were interested. Of those 40, some people backed out. But anyway, anybody that was interested, I interviewed them, I recorded everything they had to say, and then we had a selection committee that went through every one of the interviews, and they scored them. Just so you know, the selection committee was 5 people. Only one was a Fish and Game member, that was me. The others was, we had one from the tribe, one from Idaho Power, one from the Fish and Wildlife Service, and one from the University of Idaho. So, anyway, we scored all those interviews, and the highest scores were the people that we selected, for these groups. Just to clarify, let's say we had, a whole bunch of fly anglers, and they scored real high. We still only took the top 2, that's how it worked. So we had a certain number we wanted to one category. Any questions on that process? All right. So once we had this group together, we met for 8 months, typically once a month, sometimes more than that as we got closer to the end. The first 4 months were mostly spent educating all the members on all the different aspects of this fishery. We probably presented, not probably, I looked at it, we have over 250 slides we went through. So we gave these folks a crash course in fisheries management. So there was a lot of information that we poured through. The nice thing about it, once we had this huge slideshow put together, as we started having discussions in the future, if anybody had it, we just, oh yeah, here it is, and we could look at information. This way, people when making decisions on proposal ideas they like, they're making it with more of an informed decision. Then the next 4 months after, doing all this education, they spent that on developing proposal ideas and then ultimately consolidating them down. All right, because we spent a lot of time on educating everybody on all the different aspects of these fisheries, I wanted to kind of show you some of the main slides that I think had an influence on the working group members. I just want to show you 3 different topics that I think were a big deal and actually made a big difference in how people thought. All right, can you guys see all those red lines? Okay. All right, so this particular graph here shows the number of steelhead that are harvested on average in Section 3 of the Clearwater. So that's from the mouth of Clearwater up to Orfino Bridge, about 15 years ago. So this data is from 2004 to 2008. And I can tell you that older data in this showed a very similar pattern, except when we got before the period when you could harvest in August and September. But typically not a lot of harvest in August and September. That's because there's only a small section open to harvest. And then October, harvest picks up. Harvest season starts in the Majority River on October 15th. And then it continued to pick up in November. That's usually the busier, when the most of the fish were harvested, and then it dropped off. Okay, that was this pattern we saw 15 plus years ago. All right, so this next slide is going to add 5 to 10 years ago and the last 5 years. So 5 to 10 years ago was the yellow bars, and the blue bars are the last 5 years for the most part. And so both these show a similar pattern now. Now look that the peak is in October, and then it drops off for both these 5-year groupings. And so what that's showing is now basically in the 2 months of October, when harvest is open, we have more harvest in the entire month of November, and it just drops from there. And so this kind of corroborated some of the complaints that we were hearing that catch rates are dropping off quicker than they used to once harvest season starts. Okay, this is another piece of information that I know played a role in a lot of people's, or some people's decision in development of proposal packages. And this basically shows where are fish coming from or going to that were harvested in the lower Clearwater River. And we know this because when we do our creel surveys, I think most of you have seen this, our creel clerks will go up and take a fin clip, or some of you actually provide us fin clips. And from those fin clips, we can tell where those fish are going to. And so if we look at this first bar here, the way you look at it, in the month of August, and by the way, this data was collected over the last, I think, 6 or 7 years. So if you look at this, the month of August, we look at yellow here, that is the Salmon River. 20% of the fish caught are destined for the Salmon River. 20%, the blue bar here, snake, are destined for the snake. And 40% or 60% of the fish were heading for tributaries in Washington and Oregon. And if you look at this, you really don't see these red bars show up until October. And I think most of you understand this, that most of the fish using the Clearwater River are destined for areas outside the Clearwater River until you start hitting the October period. And then in October, this first week in October, all of a sudden you start seeing a shift. These fish that are destined for other places start leaving, and that's because the water starts cooling in the Snake River, and it actually starts warming a little in the Clearwater as slows some Dvorak release. And it's also the time when those Clearwater hatchery bees start showing up. And then after that, the bees just become more and more prevalent, and these out-of-basin fish leave and go for other places. So the message here is that there are two very different runs of steelhead that use the Clearwater River, and the shift in use occurs about that first week of October. Any questions on that slide? All right. So here is another slide that played a big role in our decisions that our members made. And so in the last couple of years, we've had an experimental fall Chinook salmon fishery. And through that experimental fall Chinook salmon fishery, we've been able to learn some pretty interesting things. And so one of the things we did in this experimental fall Chinook fishery was try to evaluate angler satisfaction during times when only steelhead anglers could fish. And so if you recall, last year in the Clearwater, steelhead anglers could fish all 7 days of the week, but then Thursday through Sunday, we would open up Chinook fishing. So there was a time period, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, when only steelhead fishing was open. And so we went out and we'd interview people all these days and ask them, rank from 1 to 5 your experience today, 5 being excellent, 1 being poor. And this information summarizes the responses by kind of angler group. And so if you look at this first area here, it says weekdays. It says Monday through Wednesday, when only the steelhead fishing was open. And as such, the responses only came from steelhead anglers. The yellow is fly anglers, and the blue is non-fly anglers. And so you can see they had a angler satisfaction rate on average of about 4, about the same. So the important thing is, all right, now we go to Thursday. This is when the Chinook season was open, so you could fish for steelhead and Chinook at this time. And notice how the angler satisfaction does not drop. And then you can even go to the weekend, and it still doesn't drop, especially for fly anglers. And I think the message here is that regardless of the Chinook season, whether the Chinook season was open or not, at least last year, I imagine if we had a run that was double the size like we've had in the past, we could see something different. But anyway, last year, angler satisfaction did not change for steelhead anglers when the fall Chinook season was open. And I think this played a big role in some of their decisions. I would also point out that during this survey, we learned that effort did go up a little bit when the fall Chinook season was open. Some of it was due to fall Chinook fishermen, but some of it was due to, I think most of it was due to a steelhead angler when they were going to choose, hey, should I go out on Monday through Wednesday, or should I wait later? And maybe if I catch a fall Chinook, I get to keep it. And I think that's a big reason why more steelhead anglers are actually fishing on Thursday than on these days. And the other thing we learned from this survey is that fall Chinook anglers, for the most part, were fishing in different places than steelhead anglers. Fall Chinook anglers targeting the deeper areas, especially if you look at the steelhead fly anglers, they're more in the shallow stuff, not the same stuff as where you would mostly catch a fall Chinook. All right, so that's all the data I just wanted to show you. I don't want you to pay attention to this particular table. I put it up there because I want to let you know that after we went through all this information, I then had each one of the working group members developed proposal packages that describe the seasons and limits for steelhead and fall Chinook salmon that they would like to see implemented on the Clearwater River. And when they went through this exercise, they had 12 different proposal packages. So only 2 people had the exact same thing. So, however, I wanted you to be aware that there were sideboards on this. They couldn't just develop any proposal they wanted. There were certain sideboards they had to stay within, and if they fell outside it, I let them know and said, either you gotta remove that or correct it. And, some of the sideboards we had is there are Endangered Species Act concerns in this river because the steelhead and fall Chinook are both listed. And so if they started developing proposals that we thought would, up our take level to the point it would shut down fisheries, I would say, sorry guys, change that a little bit. We also had, for the first time, a concern with harvest share. And so recently, the tribe, the Nez tribe, told us that they want the ability to harvest their half of the harvest share. That means that we have to stay to our half, and we had never done that before. And so we looked back at past days and see, boy, if we managed the fisheries the same way as we did in the past now, would we be overshooting our harvest share in most years? And based on the data we had, we would have. And so that was a concern for us that, man, many years we would have to shut down fisheries earlier, do something, keep harvest down to stay within our harvest share. And so what I told the Clearwater working group members is, look, you cannot develop proposals that can increase harvest. In fact, I prefer if you develop proposals that would decrease it some. I wouldn't throw them out if it would be the same. And so that was another sideboard that people had to stick to. Another one was to stick to seasons and limits that would affect fisheries. If they started getting into season and limit structures to protect wild fish, we let them know, now that's Fish and Game's job, and we're gonna focus on that. So that was another sideboard. Another one was that you had to provide a meaningful fall Chinook fishery. We've done enough surveys to know that the majority of people wanted a fall Chinook fishery. What type was up for debate still. And then as well, you had to provide a reasonable catch and release steelhead fishery. So those were most of the sideboards, there's a few others, but again, they couldn't just develop any proposals they want. I can tell you that almost every person there ventured a little bit outside of it, and we had to steer them back in. But eventually, we developed these 12 different proposal packages. All these proposal packages were suitable in my mind. So the next point to understand, when developing these proposal packages, this was not a consensus-based process, meaning we told everybody that, hey, if you believe strongly in your proposal packages, you don't have to change it. If all 12 of those people did not want to change theirs, we could have taken all 12 to the public and said, which one of these 12 do you want? And we reminded the folks repeatedly that the more proposal packages that are taken to the public, the less likely yours will be selected. And so I think that motivated a lot of people to talk about all the issues, see where there were disagreements, and start coordinating and compromising. And they compromised quite a bit, down to 2 different proposal packages. And so I'm going to go over what these 2 proposal packages are. For fall Chinook, they're actually, both proposal packages have the exact same fall Chinook proposals. And I'm not going to go over them, you guys all have them in your handout, but I will tell you this, that the fall Chinook salmon proposals provide about the most amount of opportunity you can for fall Chinook without starting to go outside those sideboards I told you. And so I think, that experimental fall Chinook fishery research really played a role in this. People recognize that, hey, at least in the run size we saw recently, fall Chinook anglers really aren't influencing satisfaction, so why restrict them? Let them get out those fall Chinook and get them out of there. I think I heard that almost exactly. So, all right. So because the fall Chinook salmon proposals were the same for both proposal packages. What sets them apart from one another were the steelhead proposals. And here they are. Again, you have those in your handouts. I think most of you have studied them. And so, what I did is what really separates these two proposals apart from each other are this Clearwater River upstream of Memorial Bridge all the way to Clear Creek. So these two lines here and these two here. And so I'm gonna focus in on these two, because outside of that, they're really pretty much the same, or they really don't matter, because fish don't get to them until later. So, let's focus in on those two key points. And so again, what this table here shows is the current seasons and limits in the main Clearwater from Memorial all the way up to Clear Creek. This is what we have been operating on for almost 35 years or more. This is proposal 2 for that same section. This is our proposal 1, and this is proposal 1, 2. So I'm going to kind of talk about these some, but I do want to make sure that all of you read the rationale in your handout, because I'm not going to cover all of it. And the Clearwater Working Group members, one of the things they really wanted to make sure is that people read that, because it explains why they did what they did. So let's go over proposal 1. It is 10 days. The big difference is the catch-release season is 10 days longer than the current season. And then the other difference is once the harvest season starts on October 25th, instead of having a 2 fish any size limit, limit would be 2 fish, but only 1 over 28 inches. And the significance of that is typically 85% of the fish in this river are greater than 28 inches. So kind of allow you to catch 1 fish and then just keep fishing, and you may luck onto one, but it would allow people to stay on the water after they harvest 1 fish. And so the rationale for this, and people here can also correct me or add to this, but why do this? And so part of it was that this was a compromise between kind of harvest-oriented and catch-release-oriented people. There was kind of this standoff here on differences of opinions, and hey, let's meet in the middle. Let's provide a little bit of opportunity, but not a lot of more opportunity for catch-and-release anglers during the prime time. I would think that everybody wants to fish in this time. It's warmer, the flows are down, and the steelhead are pouring in. The other thing is that this proposal is much easier to understand than that one, and that was one of the goals for this group, is to have something simpler as well as something very similar to what has been done in the past. This way, people can more plan around this. It's not a drastic difference than what has been provided in the past. And then finally, with this extended catch and release season and this more restrictive limit, it would reduce catch rates, or even stop catch harvest, the extended catch and release, so that we would have higher catch rates through the fall season. So, if you want more about it, or somebody here wants to add on to it, that is what I'm going to tell. But again, read that rationale if you want to understand more. And then, so proposal 2, very different. And its goal was for each one of the user types, so I'm talking about catch and release versus harvesting types, to be able to take advantage of the 2 different runs that use the Clearwater River. So remember that shift in use occurs about the first week of October. And so you can see here we start with the catch and release, and then on September 10, it shifts over to harvest. And then it goes back to a catch and release, so the catch and release anglers can then have a chance in this period when flows are down. There's a high abundance of these Clearwater hatchery fish, and then it goes back to harvest. So a couple other things that for why the people that developed this proposal like it is during this early period, it's a chance to catch steelhead when their flesh quality is the highest. It also, if you look at when the fall Chinook fishery occurs, the harvest fishery, it is at the same time here. So they kind of coined the term, this would provide the ultimate harvest experience, where you could go out there and harvest the steelhead, you could harvest the fall Chinook, and in some years when we have coho, you could harvest the coho. So this would provide that opportunity. And then this, when they switched over to this catch and release, for those who like to catch and release fish, we know that this is the period when those Clearwater hatchery fish are really starting to stack up. You know, probably the first week of this catch and release wouldn't be that great, because there'd be harvest going just before it, but, it would provide some exceptional catch and release fishing later during that period. So that's what I'll say about those. If any one of you who are in the group want to add to it, you're welcome to, or, we can just, if you, again, I encourage you to read the rationale section in there. Wait, let me, ask Jason or Tracy or Eric if they want to add to that. Okay, all right.
This is just a piece of the main stem.
That is the piece that is, where most of the effort occurs, where the biggest differences between these two proposals occur, where the most controversy occurs. So that's why I just showed them. If we go back up to, this, you can see, yeah, there are many other things, but if you look at this first row on proposal 1 and proposal 2, they're exactly the same. The fourth row, between the two proposals is exactly the same. The South Fork is different, but the fish don't even get there till November, so really there's not much difference there. So really what differed between these two is the main stem Clearwater, from Memorial Bridge up to Clear Creek. That was the big difference between those two.
So for Lyle, I'd like to comment on the, catch and release piece from July through August, down in the downstream of Memorial.
If that's not typically a catch and release area. I mean, most people that are fishing that area are harvesting. So why shut it down if you're trying to please catch and release?
So that is in the rationale section, but I'll tell you what they told me and why they did it. 2 reasons. If, at least for this group, it would allow steelhead numbers to build up, so when we did provide this harvest season upriver, it could provide a better harvest season. It would also be, exactly like you said, most people aren't gonna catch and release fish down there, so they probably wouldn't fish at all, and some of the fall Chinook anglers were thinking, hey, if there's fewer people anchoring out there for steelhead, then it makes it easier to troll around.
The problem with that though is the place where all the steelhead anglers anchor up is in boundary waters and it's open in Washington, so it doesn't affect
That's what's gonna be my next question.
hardly anything when you're trolling for fall Chinook, because those boats are coming out of Washington, they're still there.
So that gets to the proposal that Fish and Game developed, and, I'll just tell you about it right now. And so Fish and Game developed a proposal to make basically the snake have the exact same catch and release season as the Clearwater. So it'd go from July 1 to, August 31st. And so I talked to my counterpart in Washington and said, hey, if, we do this in the snake and the Clearwater, will you try to follow suit in the snake? And they said yes. So the reason that they, right now, they open a harvest season Memorial weekend, so you can harvest right now there for steelhead. And they said the reason they did that is because we always started harvesting earlier in the Clearwater, And so they said, if you make that change, we'll take that to our public. And so basically, they'd have to do it a year later, and we have to hope that they follow suit. Their public may say something different, but the person I was talking to thinks, yeah, Joe, we can most likely get this through. So we can't guarantee anything like that.
So would harvest be towards like Keller Bar, would that not start until, October 25th?
No, it starts, September 1.
It would still start?
Yeah. The only thing, the proposal I just talked about for the snake is it would extend the catch and release a month earlier. That's all that would change in the, and if you look on your 2-page handout, there's one on
Yeah, I
split
just
in
want
there.
to read all of it.
Yeah. The only thing it did was it extend it, which would match up to Clearwater, and then hopefully match up what Washington does.
So maybe if you guys can remember back far enough, that August harvest thing never used to be a thing.
Right.
That happened back in the day when we had all these excess numbers of hatchery fish, and they decided, well, we're getting pressured from everyone to harvest more hatchery fish, and that's where this thing came from. And I compare it to socialism. It's all fun and games until you run out of other people's money. Those aren't Clearwater fish. Those are upriver fish. We've spent our entire careers bitching about the lower Columbia, harvesting all our spring Chinook, and this is no different.
Adam, you have your hand up.
Yeah, so I just have, just a couple of questions.
So out of the two proposals, I think proposal one addresses the overharvest issues with, that we have with the tribe's concerns and stuff the best with the 1 and 1. Only concern I have with that one, the main one, is do you guys have, built in where, let's say we get a massive return of hatchery fish. Can you adjust that on a really big year and increase those limits? Because we have environmental groups that say, when we get tons of extra hatchery fish, you guys are raising too many fish, we're gonna sue you or whatever, and we don't want that fight either. So down the road, if we have excess hatchery fish, I just don't know, are your hands tied to 1 and 1?
Nope.
Nope, okay.
So,
Good.
if you recall, the 2010, 11, we went up to 5 fish limits on the snake.
Right.
And so we could do something on the Clearwater if that happened.
Do something.
We also could go the other way. In fact, we've done that many years where the run is really crappy, and so we're reducing limits or shutting seasons down, so.
Yeah, I think it's important to clarify for Adam, like, what the objectives are for Clearwater and Rorschach hatcheries as far as their mitigation responsibilities. That, I mean, they aren't and haven't been meeting their mitigation responsibilities.
Oh, I know.
You know, and so, I mean, we're a long way from the day when there's too many hatcheries.
Actually, it wasn't too long ago, if you take these last 5 crappy years, they were meeting their
They were.
mitigation responsibilities, so, before that, so. Not too far back, unlike spring Chinook, where we pretty much have never done it, so. But absolutely, we can adjust. The one thing about steelhead is they stay in the system a long time, and when the runs are good, as you all know, people come out in droves, and they can take a lot of fish out pretty quick. Because in the Clearwater, they kind of come in and stop, versus the snake, they're just really moving through fast at times until they get closer to winter, and then they settle down, but, Jason?
So one more thing on that August deal. When you're harvesting fish the 1st of August in the pond, we don't even know what we got yet. And there's been years where the entire steelhead fishery was shut down temporarily, yet all those early fish got harvested on. So I just think it's an awkward time to be harvesting when you don't even really know what you got.
I think the nice thing is, if we can pull Washington in, we'd all be the same right there. Right now, it's kind of confusing at times, but Clearwater has one season, the snake with the Idaho license is different, and the Washington and the snake is another, so.
So is that the fact that you have a longer season, because people won't be slaughtering them down in the pond, because it's pretty easy, a lot of people do it? Is that just the fact that we don't wanna have that, just so we can have a season further up into the river?
Well, you don't want to jeopardize, what happens when the run comes in low, and then that impact is right on the edge, and then your season gets shut off.
That's what I mean, so that's the reason why they're shutting it down, is the fact that pretty much too good of a fishery that far low that you're not getting a fish trap. Gotcha.
In reality, that fishery isn't, they don't slaughter them like people like to believe.
Right.
What happens down here is not ruining fisheries in the Upper Salmon or the Grand Run. It can provide some decent harvest, a couple thousand fish, in some years. Is that about right, Don?
A really big year.
Really
Like
big,
a 10-year mean is about 350.
350 in the month, that month.
A lot of people down there
Okay.
are doing the salmon fishing more than the steelhead, just because it's kind of a funner fishery.
Obi.
So, we talked earlier about this, and as far as the overharvest into the tribe share, and you told me that by reducing the limits to 1 and 1, that you thought that in most years that would cure that problem, correct?
I don't know if it would cure it, but it would help. So I can tell you this year, we ran seasons almost the same as we usually do. We just reduced the spring limit from 3 to 2, and in reality, that probably reduced harvest by just 1%, if that, because most people, as you know, don't catch 3 fish. And when it all was said and done, we were almost right dead on with our harvest share. I think we overshot by 100 fish or something, maybe 200, which is, I would call very acceptable. So, this was most of the data that we looked at, or I wouldn't say most, all the data we looked at in the past was phone survey data, and as you probably can imagine, when you survey somebody after the season's over and trying to ask them how many fish they harvested, there's tendency to exaggerate. So, this is the first year Don's crew was out there actually doing the creel, and they were like spot on. Although we did some very different things this year, and so I don't know if we can expect something similar this year as we have seen in the past, but this is a good sign that we don't have to go super, or way more restrictive, I guess, to stay in our harvest year. But like I said, we saw some strange things this year. Typically, October is our biggest year, like I showed you. It wasn't this year, I don't know. But January, which is usually one of the lowest, was the highest. And so go figure. So, never seen anything like that before. But maybe it's because we're out there doing creel, but I don't.
With data like that, why is there any reason to change it?
1 year data, we're right on the border, saw unusual thing. I can tell you, like I said, one of the main reasons to change it wasn't necessarily to stay within the harvest share, it was to maintain higher catch rates. So, the message I gave to folks was, don't do anything to increase harvest. I'd prefer if you reduce it, but we can live with something similar, so. Joey?
Do you have a guesstimation on, you know, these two proposals, how much of the harvest share it would save by extending the catch release?
I haven't gone through any math to do such a thing, but all I can tell you is that I'm certain it would reduce harvest. So, it would at least push it late into the spring, when people can more live with all sudden enclosures.
So if we don't do either one of these two proposals, is there a danger of the season closing, say, in February?
Sure, based on some of the old data. Again, that's phone survey data, but if you look at some of the old data, it varied from year to year, and I couldn't explain why it did. It could just be the survey itself, or it could be reality. But there were some years we blew way over, and there were some years we were under it. And again, it's older phone survey data, and it's not as good as what Don collects, but it certainly made me very worried. So that was the best data we had at the time.
What if, maybe I'm way out of line here, but, what if we added a $5 fee onto the licenses and we bought some of the tribe's quota? Is that possible?
I don't think the tribe's ever gonna sell harvest share.
Joe, would you, just real quick, describe some of the thoughts that the tribe has that Joe Oatman presented to us as far as like places to fish and the times that they want it? Like, they don't wanna have to fish around white people, and they wanted to have their own fishing guides and all that stuff.
So yeah, probably a bigger issue, than harvest share is the tribe also wants some more ability to get their harvest share. And so when we asked them, well, what does that mean? They said, well, every fish you catch, we can't catch. So we want you off the water for some time. And we said, well, like, how much? Well, their initial estimate was, we want you off the water 3 days a week, and we want the weekend. So I said, well, that's an interesting one. That's probably never gonna happen. They also say, well, we also would like, or we could have certain areas. You can't fish certain areas, and we can't. So these are ideas they had. I was gonna have the working group originally work on this issue, but when we tried, our working group asked some great questions. Well, when do you want to fish? Where do you want to fish? How do you want to fish? And they wouldn't give us those kind of details, and so the working group was like, we don't know how to accommodate this because they don't even know what they want to do. And so we don't want to make closures of any kind that they're not going to take advantage of. So we all recognize, and I said, look, you guys don't worry about it. If this really comes ahead, Fish and Game will tackle this, if it starts getting to some tough decisions, we'll again bring the public on. All right, guys, we have reached some sort of agreement with the tribe. Would you rather do this or that? But, so, I can tell you, this is an ongoing process. It's been a very slow process, but it is a concern, so. Yeah.
With the one-on-one proposal, for people being able to keep fishing after they catch the one, how do you foresee your mortality rate data?
We're not worried about that. Right now, we have a allowable impact in the Clearwater of 10% that we split with the tribe. In most years, the state is sitting about 3.5%, 4%, which gives the tribe 5.5 to 6. And based on all the work we've done in the Clearwater, catch and release mortalities are, 1 to 2%. We assume a 5% mortality rate, and we've actually done a new study that kind of helps us evaluate it better. And so at this point, we're not that close to hitting our allowable take for steelhead, so I'm not too worried about that particular issue.
I guess, Joe, I'm just concerned, with the fact that the slide that you ran out there where all the different angler groups, their satisfaction is so high, why we're going and, with the satisfaction through the Chinook season, through catch and release being so high, why is there a need to extend the catch and release season instead of just going to the lower harvest rate and leaving the catch and release season the way it's been for 35 years?
So this data is just on the catch and release season, this is not on the harvest season. So this is angler satisfaction, then I can't tell you what it would be for the harvest, but, so to say this is what satisfaction was in the harvest season might be a fair assessment, and might not be. So, so if you're saying why not keep the same harvest season based on this information, well, this information wasn't collected in the harvest season.
But that information was collected in the harvest season.
This is during.
No, I know this isn't, but that, if I'm right, aren't I on that's the same questions were asked for the entire season.
Like, you have the information, you just have to look at it.
So
not this data.
I understand that's not this, but.
No, I mean, not in our experimental fall Chinook fishery. Once the
Okay.
experimental fall Chinook fishery is over, we stopped doing it. There may have been other years where we looked at angler satisfaction over a longer period, yes.
But that wasn't looked at recently?
Not too long ago, probably about 5 or 6 years ago.
It just seems to me that there's holes in why we're wanting to extend the catch and release.
Well, I can tell you, there's differences in opinions on people on what is good.
Can I throw something on you right there?
Yeah.
As a catch and release fisherman, that's what I do. I'm getting a catch and keep season that's bringing more anglers for salmon fishing out during the only part of my season. So it's just a bonus. Throw us a bonus. Look at the averages coming over the dam right now. We may not have a year. Catch and release is an important part of it.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of people come here for that. There's a lot of people not coming because they don't know what the rules is. They don't know if the season's gonna be open or what. I mean,
That's
so,
more.
Yeah.
being, just the fact that we can even go fishing will be important.
I want to share this, slide with you guys. And so it kind of helps you understand the way this process works, and will help you understand how difficult it was at times for the members. It's easy to cast stones when you're not in this process, but remember, every single person compromised. There's nobody that got what they wanted. Out of all those 12, they all compromised. And so there was a point when we narrowed it down to 3 proposals, okay? So the I'll call it the season that kind of goes off and on, that takes advantage of the 2 runs, and then there was these 2, okay? This one was pretty much keep it the same, what a lot of you have been asking for. The only difference is that it have 2 fish, but only one over 28. This other one was extend the catch and release season until November 1. So instead of extending it 10 days, it would extend it 18 days. And so there's a point when I thought, all right, we're going to be public with 3 proposals. And I said, that's fine, you guys have whittled it down pretty good. But I can tell you that both of these groups, there's 5 people that represented this group and 5 that represented this group. And this wasn't all flying anglers and this wasn't all guys, it was a mix. And I can tell you, they started looking at each other, and they started also looking at the third one, and they said, my God, what if they don't vote for mine? Can I live with a catch and release season that now goes to November 1? Or, do I want the split season? And so these guys started thinking, I can give in a little bit. If you guys can give in a little bit, that way we can bring both our groups together more, make it more likely that people will pick something in between. And so that is the process that this group went through. You gotta realize that if you just stuck to this group was not gonna move either. Neither of these groups are gonna move unless both compromise. So let's say you stuck to this, nope, we want this. All right, well, could you live with it more than if people voted more for this other one? And so that is the thought process going on. It was a difficult thing, and I can tell you, there's a lot of stress going on here. And so it was kind of nice to see other people stressing except for me. So they got a taste of what it's like to be a manager, and I can tell you, some of them are getting heat for it, and I don't like it, but I'm sorry for you guys that have to take that heat, but I appreciate the effort you guys put into it. But I just want you to know that this was not an easy process, and when they're looking at all angler types out there, and you're thinking about what all anglers want, not just what guys want, they made a conscious decision. Let's meet in the middle. It's something a little happier than if one of the others. And so that was kind of the decision process in this whole thing. So,
Tracy, do you like these 2 proposals?
I can't hear you, Coach.
Do you like these 2 proposals?
I was on group 1, so I'm for group 1. And we compromised, we had more days to add to catch and release. One of our compromises was to take some of those days off and add less days to it.
So
You know?
You like proposal 1 or 2?
1. I mean, it's as simple as 1 because there's no break in the season. You guys, if you have more steelhead in the river, you're gonna have more season for you guys, but when you start running out of fish, you run out of fish.
I'll tell you what, the number 1 comment that everybody makes to me that, on my side, they're afraid that if we go along with this, and the fly guys get their, this is basically for you.
hey, wait a minute, that's not fair. This is not a fly guy thing.
But let me make this comment. Let me make this comment, okay?
They're just worried that it won't end there. Next year, you'll be wanting to get rid of the boats, get rid of the bait,
Well,
is this a compromise?
we compromised a lot. The whole group as a group compromised a lot to come up with 2 proposals. The group 2 proposal, if I remember right, had more stuff in it than this, and they compromised down to what they have there. The first group 2 proposals is the rough draft. You guys would have hated it, and we're sitting here going, you guys are out of your minds. I mean, it was all broke up in different stuff in different sections, and
It's already crazy,
It just seems like we've been going back and forth for years now, and I just wanna know.
well, I know, but let me make this comment, okay?
Are you guys are people gonna be happy?
Let me make a comment. You're gonna hate me, love me, or I don't care. But I've been fishing the Clearwater with flies for 35 years. You guys weren't here in those early years. You were on the Snake.
I was fishing for 37.
You weren't them running a power boat.
Yeah, well, I wasn't running it, I was in one.
I wasn't even born.
Okay, what I'm saying is, as a group, it's increased, the number of big boats has increased on Clearwater.
And the fly fishing hasn't increased?
Hey, man, everything's increased. That's true. I used to have the whole river to myself. There wasn't nobody out there, you know?
We'd like it that way too, but.
You got more places to fish than I do.
I think, I don't mind the river, no more fish on there, we can't fish.
Hey, let me just go, I hear some talk about, well, what if we did this? I can tell you, these proposals are set, they're not changing, okay? There's a lot of people compromising, I cannot add a new proposal because compromise were made. If all of a sudden, no, we wanna go back to this normal, well, one group already compromised one way, so it's not changing. This is what it is, all right? Now, if there's enough people that say, I don't like it, and we all want something different, I can tell you already, I'll just give you a little hint, I've read all the comments. There's a lot, because we've had, like I said, we emailed 35,000 people, and so, the number one comment isn't keep it the same. Number one comment is, shorten it. Their steelhead numbers are down, so I just want you to get a feel for what the most public wants, okay? It's not provide more harvest or maintain it. The most comment, at least for the people that don't like it, was run sucks. You guys should do something more. So that doesn't mean we're gonna do anything about it. I just want you guys to know that. Jason?
What's the percentage of anglers that are represented as, guided, fishermen? Out of all the fishermen, how many are guided?
So that varies based on run size. The smaller the run, the higher proportion that are guided. You guys keep your clients coming, and the people that aren't as good as anglers just mostly disappear, or not disappear, but don't fish. And so I would say it ranges from, and Don, you can correct me, on a big run where it's good and it's easy to catch a fish, it might be 5%, and on a low run, it might be as high as 25%. Is that about right, Don?
Yeah, I would say maybe even 30%.
So 5 to 30%, depending on the run size. So in these 4 runs, the guided anglers are a third of it. Adam?
On that same point, so you hear from the public all the time, guys are catching all the fish, guys are catching. So out of that percentage that are guided trips, let's say if 15% of the anglers for a particular year were on guided trips, how big of the harvest does that 15% take?
No, it's okay.
Because I didn't know.
I think it's, the catch rate for guided anglers are at least double the non-guided.
Yes, okay. So what does that translate into?
So if you're 15%, you catch 30% of the
30%
fish.
is the harvest.
It's probably a little higher than that, but it's, close. Is that about right, Don? Yeah, give or take, but it's right around there.
Kobe and I had this talk the other day. He thought we killed 80% of the fish. I thought it was way high. I was like, I don't think we kill 80% of the fish.
I would, on the smaller the run, so wait. So on the, smaller runs, remember, I said that then it's 30% of the anglers are guided, and you can catch your chub, so then it's 60%, so Toby's a little closer there.
So I know you can't change the proposal, this is what we got there. I think, for me, if people said they wanted a shorter season, I actually didn't mind, last year before last, when it was closed for a few months. I didn't like that, it was way too long, but I could see, rather than extending catch and release, I would be fine with closing. Heck, if all of December was closed, it wouldn't bother me.
It bothers me either, I'll go to Mexico.
But extending the catch and release, I take a big hit there. Like I said, I've tried for my whole career to build that catch and release business, and it's just not there. Our people want to harvest. They just do.
So one thing that I want to point out, a lot of these people providing these comments don't realize how our steelhead are managed. So we have, our wild steelhead, we have a allowable impact, and it's pretty small. And that, we've done a lot of modeling. The amount of impact we have in wild fish is not driving this population anywhere. So that's one piece of data. The other piece of data is when people say give them a rest, it doesn't make a difference. If we fill our hatcheries, all the extra fish are extra. Whether we fish for them or not, they're extra, so you might as well harvest them. So although that might be the most common response, there's times when you look at a response and you ignore it because they don't understand.
I'm trying to, I'm like, it don't matter if we get a million hatchery fish, they're not gonna spawn any more than they got.
So our hatcheries can only take so many, and once they're full, they're full. And making fishery rest will not get more hatchery fish out there. And then, like I said, our wild intake pack on wild fish are low enough. They've done the modeling and done these exercises, it's not driving populations anywhere. It's a lot bigger things like ocean dam effects, downstream, types of harvesters, so.
So say proposal 1 gets adopted. What if in 3 years, we still have people unhappy? What's the process of of going back and changing it again? Because that's what makes me the most nervous, is that we've had one model for 35 years, and now we're changing it. And like with a lot of the stuff we see in Western Washington, we see rivers closing, we see boat restrictions, we see a lot of draconian stuff. I think that makes a lot of us really, really nervous when we start seeing the idea of regulation changes beyond just, limits. I mean, we can all wrap our heads around, hey, we need to harvest less fish, that kind of stuff. But this is the kind of stuff that starts making the hair on my neck stand up a little bit, because it's, I get worried about what might be down.
Yeah, well, that's a good point, and I can tell you that we went through a process about 15 years ago now, but the same opinion holds true, and that was, anglers don't like changing regs, because it confuses them, they don't understand, and so I can tell you, big changes, we don't like to constantly do them, but in this particular cases, there were some big looming things, and we took this new approach, and if that change would occur, and let's say there's a lot of complaints, I would still want to let it run at least 2 reg cycles before to see if people can adjust or not before we did it. Now, if there's such a big public outcry, we could run through the whole process again. I would never say it wouldn't happen, but I can tell you that we typically like to let things run a while for people to get used to them before that way we're not doing exactly what you said, just here, just there, just here again, so. Tracy, did you have your hand up, or Jason?
35 years ago, all those coastal rivers had a lot of fish in them. They don't have them now. So we're one of the last places that's got a few of these fish left. So think about that.
Jason?
I was just remembering one of the big compromises when we, Travis probably remember this too, and Toby, we had a IRCA meeting, which when we were asked to implement a salmon season in the Clearwater, we all sat down and kind of thought, we don't want a salmon season that's going to screw up with our steelhead. Remember talking about that?
Yeah.
And we came in here and we said, Joe, we decided we don't want to have a salmon season in the Clearwater. Well, that ain't happening. We've already decided.
That's outside the sideboard. Bring them in, boys, bring them in.
So here's what that did. The catch and release steelhead component of the group felt like they were getting the salmon season shoved down their throat. It's gonna be a benefit in one way or the other for guys like us if we wanna take advantage of it. The steelhead fly fishermen and the catch and release guys were like, hey, we won't fight it. You wanna do the 7-day a week, because originally we were talking about, well, how many days a week can we do it? And everybody's like, look, give us a little catch and release on the steelhead, you can have your salmon season, 7 days a week. There was no fight over that. And that was one of the big compromises that stuck out in my mind.
I'd take steelhead over.
Oh, yeah, no, we came to the table saying we didn't want a salmon season. I hate salmon.
I do too. Especially when they're meat.
Exactly what Rusty told me last night.
Those fall fish are not good to keep.
When they get up to Clearwater.
cohort on that, though. That's the first time I've heard of it.
Cohort, just cohort, don't taste it.
The coho run, by the way, this year could be huge, so,
Yeah.
could be really big. So what was it, about 5, 6 years ago, we had a pretty decent coho run, it could be like double or even triple that.
Can we get the tribe to put those anywhere else other than Lapland Creek?
But, most of them are put up at Clear Creek.
Yeah, but that, I want, like, can we get them to stop somewhere else other than Lapland Creek? That's right, go big candy.
That would be nice.
Can we put them in Bedrock Creek or somewhere else, release
everywhere.
them right there, plant big fish on them?
Do those things, I don't even know, is anybody catching them as they blow? I guess there's another stopping point, a lot of them stop at Dvorak because they actually rear them there, so some of them imprint back to Dvorak.
Yeah, there was a good little group of them right at the point of the hatcheries this fall, so much so that they were in there pretty January there.
I got a question for you, Joe. So, Potlatch River gives a strong run, and we find fish staging in front of them out there, you know, well to late into the year. And, you know, it allows us to spread the boats out. That's one problem that we kind of have now is late in the year, January, February, we're all set to pink out, super annoying. But, you know, you see this little area where there's these fish caked up, and it happens a little bit at Tech also. If you release some Dvorak hatchery fish in like Pine Creek, Bedrock Creek, all that, would they do that? Would they come back there? Would they stage there like that to where the fish wouldn't all run to Dvorak and stay there and 30 boats have to be up there butting in?
Fish tend to go back to where they're released, as long as they're given time to imprint on that water. The problem with that, one of the things that we're trying not to do is, spread out hatch releases. Because what we've seen is that the closer you are to a hatch release, the more, the wild populations start looking like hatchery populations. And the problem with that is once it starts stocking, the hatchery portion kind of doesn't do well. They're not adapted really to live in these wild environments. So, we've kind of already reached agreements with NOAA. We're gonna try to keep our releases in certain areas to keep the impacts that hatchery fish, the breeding with wild fish part,
That makes sense. I get that.
down. In fact, we've done a study where you can see that the farther you get away from Dvorak, the more the tributaries look like true wild populations. The closer to Dvorak, the more they look like a hatchery fish. Adam?
Kind of on that same note, it seems like this year I saw a lot more fish trucks going downstream. Did you guys increase the trucking downriver? Or maybe I just noticed more,
What time of year?
just like all through the fall, like November, December, January. Like, it seemed like every day there was trucks going downriver.
You stand out there in the fall, and you,
Were
I
they
mean, I'm,
water hatchery or were they federal hatchery trucks?
They're federal, they're Dvorak trucks.
yeah,
Going downstream in the fall.
I see 5 or 6 a day.
Yeah.
Because you guys are busy running the boat, I'm walking the bank, looking, and
Yeah,
nothing.
I just noticed a lot more, I don't know if you increased
There's a
it,
lot of-
maybe I just noticed for the dog.
That could be in the fall, they're taking fish from Lower Granite Dam, Fall Chinook, adults,
Dvorak's not really.
and they're taking them to, at least the ones in Idaho, they're taking to the Nez Perce Tribal Hatchery, so that wouldn't be any
They might have been.
more than normal. That's the only thing that Don and I could think of that, that would be. For the, your trout, they are doing a little more now, they're starting to trap coho too, so on top of Fall Chinook, they're also trapping coho at the dam, so there are more trucks going up now, so. The nice thing about if they can get all their brood stock of coho and Fall Chinook at the dam, everything that goes by it is harvested.
Possible to spread out that fall Chinook trap at Lower Granite a little bit, instead of just right at the front end, all of it.
So, on bigger runs, yes, it's not a problem. And so they have a goal where they're trying to get 30% of the brood stock to be wild fish, and they also want certain size, fish, bigger fish. And so if you wait later, they can't meet those wild fish goals or the big size fish goals. If you think about it, all the commercial, tribal fishing downriver, they're taking out all the big fish. And so if you didn't kind of weigh heavy on the big fish up here, you slowly get smaller and smaller fish. So to kind of meet those hatchery goals, they need to do that on the smaller runs especially. When you have big runs, there's a lot more fish to choose from, and they don't need to do that as much.
Can you guys send out like an email when you do that though?
When we do what?
When you do the, you catch them, because they're usually pretty dead for about 3 weeks.
So, yeah, typically what's gonna happen is you're gonna have the opening week, will be good, you got a bunch of fish that are dumb, and those are the biggest ones. And, you'll catch those, and then they trap the heck out of them, you're right, and that pretty much ends about beginning of September, so you do have a week or two season, so.
Water temperatures and.
You can almost guarantee that's gonna happen on these smaller runs, unfortunately. So, to me, again, it's in, I think, all of our best interest, we don't wanna just have those bigger fish be a less and less part of the brood stock, because we're just gonna get smaller fish.
So you're saying, you're like taking most of the zero. I mean, is what we're seeing with like all of a sudden there's, 26.5-inch males and jacks? I mean, is that representative of what's getting taken? Because,
No, they don't use the small fish for brood stock.
no, I understand that, but they're left in the river, that's why we're catching them.
Right,
Yeah.
so what's the question?
So you guys are taking all the bigger ones that like the Fisheries, they're,
Early in the run, we are,
48 inches.
yeah, early in the run, we are.
But when does that stop?
About beginning of September. It varies from year to year. If all of a sudden it's going real good, then they'll cut back. So I think this year they're trapping 80% of the run. And then, so, I think they got towards the end of August, beginning of September, it's like, oh, we got more than we need, and they cut it way back. So, when the run is big, they don't need to do that as much. And the run is a little bit bigger than they thought it would be last year, so they kind of over harvested maybe in the beginning. But they're getting those wild, and the other importance of getting these wild fish in there is, they keep mixing the hatchery and the wild, so they pretty much look the same out there. And so you can actually have fairly successful spawning, with the hatchery wild fish, because they kind of have all the same genetics, and that's important, as we try to recover these fall Chinooks. So if we kind of get the returns like we did 5-6 years ago, those are numbers high enough to delist them, which makes things easier for everybody. So, hands, no? Toby?
We had a good conversation, and seeing how we're here to, help everybody make the right decision here. Can you kind of explain to everybody, what it would be like if everybody rejected these proposals, and maybe the repercussions or the dangers of that? You told me some good tidbits about that, from dangers of rejecting.
Well, we went through this process where a lot of different user groups got together, compromised, worked hard, and developed this. And all of a sudden, let's say, everybody, a huge portion said, we reject it, and they all said they rejected it for the same reason, keep it the same. I guess that would indicate to me that putting together a working group is not the way to address the public at large. And so we better go back to Fish and Game. I think it's also important to realize that as we argue amongst one another, that we're probably each other's best allies too. We're all fishermen, we all care deeply about it, and there's big issues. I indicated that the tribe doesn't want us on the water half the time, almost in some places, and I think we need to stick together and come to good solutions how we can get the most out of this. There's huge issues with survival downriver, and I personally like it when we're all sticking together versus fighting, because some of the problems facing us are, I think, a lot more difficult than this one here. So I don't know if I was getting at what you're talking about, Toby, or?
Yeah, no, pretty much. I think you were telling me, what the commission would do if they had a bazillion people reject the thing, or, I don't know, maybe.
So if there's proposal 1, proposal 2, and I don't like either. Let's say 20% wanted proposal 2, and 20% wanted proposal 1, and the 60% said reject. And most of them said don't change. It would be hard for me not to go that route. It would, to me, that'd be kind of disappointing. That somehow, as a working group, we kind of didn't really understand the angling public as a whole. And so I don't think this group missed the boat. They're very aware of it. They represented all the different angler types. But if that happened, it would tell me, one, I probably didn't do a very good job in figuring out how to best represent this angling public with the group that was selected. And it probably, yeah, I'd have to definitely think hard on how to do a better job at a controversial issue in the future.
So I think, Joe, you're being a little bit hard on yourself, or even the agency as a whole. I think that all of you need to realize, and Jason and Tracy and Travis attested this, we were provided so much information that I think you said it, Adam, like the general public doesn't understand, like the dynamics of these fisheries, the dynamics of these runs, the comparison of hatchery returns to wild returns, what's allowable. And with all that information, from a working group perspective, we have way more than the general public does. Even though we're all anglers of various types, like we have a lot more thought put into these than what I think you're hearing from the general public. And even this evening, it just scratches the surface of the amount of information that was provided to us all. And so, but I think Joe's got a point. I mean, for those of you that don't know me, I work for Trout Unlimited. Yeah, we're a cold water conservation organization that are fairly devoted to wildfish, but with that, I think the hardest thing for me going into this was the angst among anglers. And it didn't matter if it was guides, or if it was fly anglers, or just gear guys. The angst among the user groups, because as Joe pointed out, there's nothing more that's going to harm these fisheries than that angst amongst us all. And so if there is compromise, there is. But I think as a user group of this fishery, no matter how you use it, you have to understand and appreciate the perspective of those other users. You might not like it, you might not agree with it, but in the end, the stronger we'll all be for these fisheries. Well said. And I'm all about killing hatchery fish. The more hatchery fish we can kill, I'm all for it.
And one thing to remember when we do all this process and we get all the data, and then we have a commission meeting where the commissions are gonna present it themselves, and they're like the working group, they get all this information and data put at them, and they see all these different views. Right now we're going through some wolf stuff this week, which is quite interesting. And you go through this stuff and you sort it all, so you give them the best data you can to make a decision, and it's tough, At the end, the commission may make a decision that's not a 60%, 30%, 20%. They're going to make a good decision that best fits their constituents and best fits science we provide them, provide that public service out there, provide that ability to have a season on a surplus of fish out there, the best we can to meet those needs. And ultimately, they can put all this together, and it's so true. Well said, Eric. I know Joe's been saying about getting together, because the challenges we got coming up are pretty big. These fisheries and challenges and everything we got. So in the end, the best we can kind of come together, compromise like the working group did to some of these proposals, whichever one you guys want to do, it would be nice. It'd be nice for the fishing game to go forward with. It'd be nice for the commission to make a more rational decision and a more educated decision on that. But nothing, and they fully see people to go, this is bullshit, we can keep it the same, right? We can keep it the same, or we can go a different direction. But remember that there's 1,000 different views coming to the commission at this one time and space. I have to think.
Well, if I can tell you that you people in this room know more about fishing than I'll ever dream of knowing about it. So, to the extent, in a working group, we're really hard for a long time. There was knowledgeable people there. I went to a few of the meetings. I was impressed by how well you folks know what it is you're doing. And I need you to tell me what's best. Because honestly, it doesn't make any difference to me. I support outfitting. I think people that try to make a living providing access to sporting, fishing, I think it's great. I support outfitters. You're not the only element to it, but, to the extent that you can all be on the same page, will be very helpful. And I don't know if the governor's gonna keep me around for 4 years or 8 years, he may or he may not, but my intention would be, there were some concerns about if we do this, is it gonna just keep going, and that would never be my intention, because I don't believe in jerking you around either. I mean, you're trying to make a living, you need consistency, you need dependability, so, to the extent that you can all get as close together as possible, be very, very helpful.
So I think, I looked at the responses up to today, and we've, those that have an opinion, there's a lot that didn't, were about 1,700 responses, which is pretty good, so, I'm just happy with, the number of people that are passionate about this fishery. That's a good thing. Good thing to have people who care.
If we did the online survey, we don't do this, right?
I would like it if you fill that out just so I can get a feel for what this group wants, yeah. I can tell you that I will pool your group with the other public meetings, but it's good for me just to see, the differences of opinion.
You still holding that meeting on?
So
if I fill this out, can it wipe out my response?
So here's the way, if you duplicate a response on the internet, I will take the second response.
Okay.
That's the way I've been telling everybody. Go ahead, I'm taking, and some people have accidentally hit multiple clicks, and I said, I've taken the last one, unless sometimes somebody put a comment, even the first one, and they accidentally hit submit a couple of times. But my protocol is I get all the responses. If you did it through the email, there's a pen, and I sorted by all the pens and all the duplicates. I take off the first one and leave the last one. If I see your name multiple times, I will take off the first one, leave your last name. So I saw your name on the general internet, so if you want to put it in there again, I will just take the second.
Yeah, I didn't get the, for whatever reason.
So to get an email survey, two things, you either had to have bought a salmon or steelhead permit, and you had to have provided your email address when you bought your license. So
That's weird. I don't know where it went. They've got everything.
So if you want to get that in there and you didn't get that email, you can go into, what do we call that? Your user portal or whatever, kind of, if you check your special hunt draws and stuff, and there's a place that you can enter your email address if you didn't get one of those, so.
And Toby, as an organization like group, having that message in an independent letter to the commission is very valuable. Maybe the group can't come to consensus to pick one and everybody's gonna do their own, but to have those concerns about more change, things you guys brought up are very valid, and bring those so they can review those, and I've done a lot of season study, mostly on the wildlife side of my career, but we use those the next round, the scoping starts, and they understand that, and they understand the views of the outfitting community a little better and a little clearer. Just like we said, I learned so much about outfitting and fishing right here than ever, so those are very important. If you can kind of come together with a group and say, hey, this is kind of our concerns. Everybody's kind of going their own, we kind of like this one, but this is this is what we really do like, and consensus, but, I don't know how you get voting and all that stuff in an organization, but.
Yeah, that's why we're here.
Yeah.
Like I said, we wanna make an educated statement, we wanna make the right statement, and, we love some fish, and we don't wanna be fish hogs, we share, we do share. And, we'll prepare
take, when we all kind of figure out what we want to talk about, and then send some letters out, and go from there, but, yeah, no, I'm glad we had the meeting, and, I think we all learned a lot, and that's exactly what we wanted to accomplish. Perfect, thank you.
Thanks for that. I enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you very much, yeah.
Did you guys want to talk about the other proposals, or are you good? All right.
What's the consensus so far on the three we should have finished up?
You mean, what are people saying?
Yeah.
I can't really tell you what the results are.
Come on.
I can tell you after all the voting's done.
Yeah.
Email it.
And decision has been made, then I'll let you know. Just shoot me an email.
Yeah.
Someone don't want it to listen.
Yeah, just put them right there, everybody, if you would, and I'll gather them up.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, when you take a group like this, it's actually on the river doing this. I mean, it's not a boat or anything like that, but to me, those comments are more valuable. I mean, to me, they just, you guys are a very reasonable group of people. You're trying to educate yourself more, you're trying to be active, you're trying to be a part of it. So, for me, what you say will have more weight than maybe what some other people have to say that don't know as much about it as you, if that makes sense.
We have a lot of members that are like working in Alaska or gone, and I didn't even think about having this whole thing opened up on Zoom. We could have had a ton more of them in. But yeah, we'll reach out to all of them, and we'll report about the meeting, and we'll have a discussion again, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, even if your comments are, you guys are full of shit and you can start over. Whatever.
I think there's a lot of work put in.
Been a few of those.
Yeah, I really thought that everybody put in.
That's the people that are like, be more conservative, you want to break.
All right, well, thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thank you.
We'll discuss other chapters.
So we do have that meeting on the 16th. You guys don't have to come, but if you really want to, you can see the same thing again.